Chapter 17 is dealing with Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. So we're going out of the studio and into the light. And the title of this chapter comes from this idea that during the late 1800s, they had actually invented the collapsible paint tube. And so now what was going on is painters could mix up their paints and they could package them into these new collapsible paint tubes and then take the paint tubes with them out into the field, right? They could put their canvases, right, kind of on a backpack, put their paints in the backpack and go out and paint, right, in nature, basically. This was the first time we really see artists able to do this, so it really changes the dynamic of what's possible. And it leads to the Impressionist movement, which really asks, about perception and how our eyes see the world around us. How do we take in everything around us? And how do we process it? And Impressionists said, when you're looking at paintings, you're really looking at very finished products. But that's not life, right? That's not how life works. So can they show you an instant, right? Can they show you a fleeting moment and make you go, oh, I understand that the world is made up of these passing moments, really, rather than these sort of finished ideas. And if you contrast realism and impressionism, I always say that realism is very much about revolutionary subjects that have never really been seen before. But Impressionism is really about revolutionary style. The subject matter is actually quite pedestrian or quite everyday. It's like parties and fun people and such. So again, it's really quite normal subject matter, but the style is really quite different and quite new. So what are some of the things that Impressionists are looking into? They're looking into things like optics, how we see, color and light, and how we process them. Now, think about it. If you're looking at something and talking about the color with a friend or with a loved one, you may be surprised when you say, well, that looks like gray to me. And they say something like, well, it looks more like a blue to me. Or that looks like a magenta. It looks more like a pink, and so on and so forth. I remember when I got married, I was very shocked by this. Like, oh, you don't see color the way I do. We're both processing the world from kind of two different perspectives, but we're both correct. We're both seeing through our eyes. And so Impressionists are interested in how each individual, in a sense, processes a visual image. And if you look at this, for instance, and this is a Claude Monet that we're going to talk about in greater depth. Again, you're looking at it as a fleeting moment that's sort of a passing moment. In all of us as viewers, we're trying to kind of mix and look at the scene, right? And we're trying to look at the colors and mix them and sort of figure out what's going on from our own perspective, let's say. And again, if you compare and contrast, you can look at neoclassicism on the left and Impressionism on the right and get a sense of the difference in technique. Neoclassicism, as I mentioned, was a very finished style. You cannot even see a brushstroke. By the way, if you did not figure this out, this is a detail of David's Oath of the Horatii. You're seeing just the foot, right? The feet, right, of the father and the daughters, right? But notice you can't see any brushwork. It's very finished and controlled. Contrast that with Impressionism, where there's just splooshes and splashes of color and brushwork all over the place. If you've never seen the movie Clueless, one of my favorites, I always think of this quote where Cher is asked, is a girl pretty? And she says, no, she's a full-on Monet. Monet is the painter on the right. From far away, it looks okay. From up close, it's a big old mess. So again, is a girl pretty? No, she's a full-on Monet. Far away, not so bad, right? Up close, big old mess. If you got as close as possible to the David, it never falls apart. But again, the same can't be said right for the Monet. So the working styles are very, very different. Subject matter is very different too. The Impressionists, they like to kind of experiment with being outside, as I mentioned, and just experimenting with the same object in different lighting conditions or different conditions of atmosphere and such. Plein air refers to out in the open air. And I'd mentioned that with the collapsible paint tube, they could go outside. This leads to subjects like the haystacks that you see on the left. Monet really proves this idea of how to think about the landscape or a building, let's say, as just a vehicle for experimentation. How to paint the Rouen Cathedral in midday or at sunset or sunrise, right? how to paint haystacks in the summer, in the winter, etc. So you look at a lot of these, and it's like a serialization, or again, the item is just a vehicle for you to experiment with, kind of over and over and over again. I have spent my whole life looking at Monet's Rouen Cathedral paintings, not really thinking about why this cathedral. I went to France a couple years ago, and we went on a river cruise. And one of the towns we went to was Rouen, and we did a little, city tour. And we were in the city square, and we heard a guy talking to another group of people, and he was saying, "Well, over here we have the cathedral, and across the city square we have the apartments where Monet was living." And all of a sudden, it just clicked together in my mind. Monet lived in the apartment across from the Rouen Cathedral. He didn't really care about the cathedral. He just happened to live across the street from it. So as a painter, he was like looking outside, and saying, that's right there. I'll just keep painting it. I'll paint it at sunrise. I'll paint it at sunset. I'll paint it in the rain. I'll paint it in the snow." It wasn't about him being religious or even caring about the cathedral at all. It was just available to him. So it was like this moment of epiphany, like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense for an impressionist to paint the thing right outside his apartment window. So again, they would use these things as kind of vehicles for experimentation. Impressionists also were very interested in socializing, people on the move, people going to cafes, hanging out. And the idea of just walking a city and looking around. They called this a flâneur. This was a person who just walked around and took in the city. And this is especially common in Paris. And I've been lucky enough to go to Paris a couple different times, and it's one of my favorite cities. And one of the things I like about it is it's truly the city where you just want to walk and look, and everything is beautiful. Everything is cool. Like, you're just walking around. There's always a new adventure around the corner. So I can understand why the Parisians were flâneurs, because this is a city kind of built for seeing and being seen, let us say. And so again, their subjects kind of fall in line with that. The final subject they were really looking at was the life of the bourgeoisie. I used to really have to explain this term a lot. With the rise of bougie as an insult, not so much anymore. But bourgeois is middle to upper class. We usually say with new money, and the idea that maybe they have money but they don't have taste. So it's not always considered the nicest, titling for somebody to say they're bourgeois or bourgeoisie. You might be saying, oh, they're new money. They don't really know what they're doing with it, though. They're just kind of throwing it around. These are people that, to be as nice as possible, these are people to me that have a lot of cash, lots of leisure time, and we get to see them in their environment. We get to see them laughing and joking and partying. And that's what you might see, like in this painting by Renoir. But these are the typical subjects you would see from an impressionist.